All right, today we are building a digital fortress. We're talking about web security, but not in some abstract, high-level way. No, we're looking at it from right where you are, the developer in the trenches, the one actually writing the code. And it all starts with a single, super common, and kind of painful mistake.
We're starting right here because, let's be honest, who hasn't had a moment like this? That stomach drop feeling when you realize a simple oversight might have exposed something really important. This quote from a developer on Dev Community just nails that feeling. It's a tough situation, but believe me, it is an all too common story. So, what was the culprit in this specific case? A tiny 9-character prefix. You see, in a framework like Next.js, any environment variable that starts with next public underscore is, by design, bundled into the JavaScript that gets sent to the user's browser. It's a feature, right? Meant for things you want the public to see. But if you accidentally put that prefix on a secret API key, well, you've just handed over the keys to the kingdom to anyone with a web browser.
Now, as much as that specific story makes you wince, we've got to zoom out, because this isn't just about one developer or one framework. This is about a pattern of accidental leaks that happens all the time. And that's the key takeaway here. These small mistakes aren't just one-off bad days. They're actually symptoms of a much bigger, more systemic challenge that we all face in modern web development. You know, the pressure to ship features fast, the insane complexity of our tools, the sheer number of dependencies we're juggling, it all creates the perfect storm for these kinds of errors. So let's climb up to that 30,000-foot view for a minute and actually look at what the data tells us about the state of security across the entire ecosystem. A recent survey of NPM package developers found something fascinating. Even though most of them said security was extremely important to them, over 41% rated their own packages as only somewhat secure. Think about that. There's a huge gap between how much we care about security and how confident we actually are in our own work. And that gap, that's where the danger is. So, what are developers actually worried about? What's really interesting is that it isn't just about their own code. Look at the top two concerns: supply chain attacks and dependency vulnerabilities. These are threats coming from the outside, from the very tools and packages we rely on to build our apps in the first place. And this right here, this illustrates a huge part of the problem. Only 40% of developers are actually satisfied with their security tools. And why is that? Well, the survey points to a massive issue: alert fatigue. We're just getting buried in so many false positives and so much noise that the very tools that are supposed to help us are often just making things more confusing. And look, the consequences of all these little gaps are not just theoretical. In 2022, the massive Optus data leak, which exposed the personal info of millions of people, was traced back to one single API endpoint that was just left open. No authentication needed. It's such a stark reminder of how a seemingly small oversight can lead to a complete catastrophe. Okay, so we've established the problem. It's big, it's systemic, and the stakes are incredibly high. So how do we actually fight back? Well, let's dive into a clear framework for building a much better defense. This framework, which is adapted from Vercel Academy, is just a fantastic mental model. Instead of thinking of security as this one giant, scary monster, we can break it down into 5 distinct layers. Just ask yourself these questions. Do I know who the user is? Is the data they're sending me clean? Do they actually have permission to do what they're trying to do? Are they spamming my server? And finally, are my error messages accidentally giving away secrets? Now, a framework is a great starting point, but let's get practical. Let's see how we can actually harden our development process by zooming in on just one of those layers: input validation. Okay, let's talk about a technique called fuzzing. It's a beautifully simple idea. Instead of just testing your app with the happy path data you expect it to get, you just bombard it with junk, random data, weird data, malicious data, and you just see if you can break it. It's a proactive way to find those hidden weaknesses before an attacker does. And this really brings us to the two sides of the input validation coin. On the offensive side, you've got tools like Wrestler, which basically acts like an automated attacker, fuzzing your API to find bugs for you. Then, on the defensive side, you have libraries like Zod or Joy, which you build right into your code to create super strict rules for what data you'll even accept. A truly solid system needs both. Finally, we have to talk about the bigger picture. Writing secure code and using the right tools, that's only part of the equation. For our last section, we need to look beyond the code editor, because real security is a mindset. Just look at this production checklist from Vercel.
security is just one of 5 pillars here. It sits right alongside things like operational excellence, reliability, and performance. This really shows that in a professional setup, security can't be some add-on at the end. It has to be woven into the entire life cycle of your application. And let's be real about the biggest barriers we face. They aren't always technical. According to that NPM survey, the #1 challenge developers face is simply time. We just don't have enough of it. Right behind that is how hard it is to keep up with the constant flood of security updates and the crazy complexity of our dependency trees. This is just the reality for developers everywhere. So the crucial point we land on is this. Security isn't just a feature you code. It's more like a three-legged stool. You need robust code built with all those defensive techniques. You need solid processes that actually integrate security into your daily workflow. And maybe most importantly, you need developer awareness. Just knowing the risks, from a simple next public underscore prefix all the way up to a complex supply chain attack. And that leads us to our final question, one for you to think about. You might spend all day writing perfectly hardened functions and validating every single input, and that is fantastic. But take a step back and look at the whole picture. Is your process, your team's workflow, your deployment checklist, how you audit your dependencies, is that just as secure? Because that is the difference between having secure code and having a truly secure application.